Hello and welcome to the Life Wisdom Podcast. Today we have with us Sandeep Khanna. Sandeep is a freelance corporate trainer, a public speaker, and lives in New Delhi, India. Sandeep has varied interests ranging from being a cricket umpire to completing his first book about the last 50 years of India. It's recently under publication and we're going to tell you more about that. He's also deeply inspired by Hindi poetry, particularly the works of Gopaldas Neeraj. He's an alumnus of Delhi University's Faculty of Management Studies and Shri College of Commerce. He's worked about 30 years in 3 leading multinational companies in leadership positions both in India and the UK. Let's get started. Welcome to the Life Wisdom Podcast, where we believe that life is our greatest teacher. We invite a variety of people to share their life stories and lessons because that wisdom is a priceless treasure worth sharing with friends, family, and the world. With that, let's welcome Sandeep. How are you?
Thank you, Rohit. I'm very well. Thank you for having me on this podcast. My great privilege to be speaking to someone as learned as you.
Sandeep, it's your wisdom that we've come to tap into here. And I'd love to know more about how is it that you've had such a varied life. I mean, you've gone to so many different, experiences, ranging from being in the corporate world to now being a speaker and author and all of that. What's caused this turnaround? Why didn't you just stay on the straight and narrow path? What led you to make all these changes?
Well, the corporate world was my profession, Rohit, and cricket and Hindi poetry were my 2 great passions since childhood. So, as the corporate life was sort of coming to an end, I decided to devote more time to writing, to Hindi poetry, mainly Gopaldas Neeraj, and also get into cricket umpiring because I can't play a good game of cricket anymore given my gray hair.
So I see that you've gone to your passions, you've gone to the things that really inspire you and motivate you and fill you up. Is that kind of what you've been doing?
That's correct. It's the closest synonym of life. And the last 4-5 years when I've been pursuing my passions with greater zeal because I had more time have been quite wonderful.
So tell us about your passions. Where would you like to start?
Well, it was cricket has been the main passion. Although recently, as I just mentioned, since I can't play cricket anymore, I have to respect my age. So I've got into golf, which is also really fascinating. And when I stopped playing cricket, a friend encouraged me to remain in touch with the sport by taking on cricket umpiring. So I applied to the England Cricket Board, where I was at that time, Association of Cricket Officials. They admitted me to a course, which I managed to qualify.
Okay. What has been the inspiration behind cricket? Have you ever distilled it out? Like what really, inspired you, drove you?
When we were growing up in Delhi in the early 70s, cricket was all around us. And when I took to cricket, I was reasonably okay at it. The whole history of the game, the riveting nature of cricket, the romance associated with it, the fair play. There's a saying that we use that saying in our day-to-day life that it's not cricket, which means fair play. So all those things combined, I was really fascinated by
The riveting romance. Tell me about that little bit, because that seems to be at the heart of all of even your pursuit for poetry and history and all of that. So tell me this part. What is the riveting, romantic part that you saw?
I was seeing a game of cricket in 2007 at Lord's with an English friend of mine. And he said that when I see cricketers in their creams walk out onto a lush green Lord's, there is something spiritual about it. So, that was, of course, that's how he put it. But when I got into the game, it was just like chess being played outdoors.
Wow.
And it could lend itself to infinite possibilities. That's why the laws of the game are constantly being revised, because every time you feel you've covered all eventualities, something new happens.
So, one of the things you've just said right now, if I may pick on that, is infinite possibilities. And that's one of the deep things about spirituality that always attracted me. You know how in religious people tend to think in terms of one possibility. They tend to think in terms of one way, one sort of dimension. But what I've always loved about spirituality is the infinite possibilities. Now here I see you bringing cricket into that light, seeing the romance in it, seeing the infinite possibilities in it. Then I see you go into poetry. Tell me a little bit about your journey through Neeraj's poetry.
So my father used to listen to poetry, and at times we would switch on Doordarshan.
Mm-hmm.
And
Tell
when
our
I heard
people what
Neeraj,
Doordarshan is, because not everybody around the world knows what that is.
well, that was the only channel available in India in the 1980s.
Mm.
It was a state channel. So I would hear, because my father had switched on the television, I would listen to the poetry, and I found Neeraj so mesmerizing, so simple yet so cathartic and so intoxicating, that I started following him more and more. And then I realized that he had written films and Hindi songs, and each song was better than the previous one. They were so fascinating.
So he was
And then
right. The
as I went,
songs were written by him in that were in movies.
yes,
Okay.
yes, he had paired up with S.T. Burman and Devanand
Okay.
mainly, but of course he wrote for other films also. But he was there for 5-6 years only, and then he left films, and he was just he would recite his poetry in Kavi Sammelans.
Hmm.
So as I went through my life, and as all of us, we have our difficult periods also. So in those difficult periods, nothing was better for me than Neeraj's spiritual poetry laced with romance.
So this is Gopaldas Neeraj, right?
That's right.
How could people find his work? Have you got a particular favorite edition of his book that you'd like to recommend?
Well, he has 5 or 6 of his books are available. And I picked up all his books soon after his death.
Which
in
one would you
2018.
recommend so that people can read it on Amazon or whatever
Well,
if they want to pick it up?
For a start, there is a book, Karwan Guzar Gaya,
Okay.
which is a famous song of his also. That's a book.
Okay.
But there are 25-30 books of his.
Okay. Gopaldas
And they're
Neeraj.
all Gopaldas Neeraj.
Right.
There are some YouTube videos also, because
Okay.
he was alive when the social media started.
Right.
So he passed away in 2018. So the 10 odd years of his rendition on the stage
Yeah.
is available on YouTube as well.
Let's come now to the most interesting part. That is the book that you have been writing and are about to publish. You said to me that the title is still not available, but we're going to have our audience listen and hopefully, look out for it when it's ready and released. But for now, if you could tell me what it's about.
Well, we have a proposed title. It's with the publisher, so I'm,
That's okay.
I sort of don't share it. But it's a book on the last 50 years of India. And it's not a description, but it's anecdotal through stories, through characters, a bit of fact and fiction mixed together.
So your experience essentially that depicted through these characters, or how is it? Or is it a lot of...
No, it's actually 3 strands, Rohit. It's how India has developed in the last 50 years. Because, when sitting with friends, the one thing we often chat about is the change in India, the social, economic, cultural change in India. And what we've experienced in our lifetime is mind-boggling change, which has happened in India.
Why don't you enumerate some of that? What are some of those main changes that you've seen that have been so mind-boggling?
Well, in the 1970s, we were living in a socialist India.
Yeah.
Today, it's a free market. I used to write essays along with my friends in college on liberalization of India. Then the economy did liberalize in the 90s. If you remember Gavaskar, since we mentioned cricket, his game was very studied because he was living in an India which was socialist India. And then you see when Sachin came, he was more flamboyant. And today you have the era of T20 cricket. There was no stock market in those days.
Right.
Today it's flourishing. It's over 80,000 points.
What are some of the changes you've seen happen with people, with lifestyle?
I like to believe, as I've seen, Rohit, that blasphemy of today becomes the social norm tomorrow, and it becomes the law day after.
Wow.
So you find a lot of things. You find a lot of, and that's why, it's futile to hold rigid opinions because time changes everything.
Give us an example of that. That was blasphemy at one time and that became normalized later on.
In the late 70s and 80s, my friends and I, most of my friends were boys at that time. We used to walk holding each other's hand or with our arm around their shoulder. You don't see that today. Today, you only see a boy and a girl holding hands. I spend a lot of my time in Gurgaon, and you find people living in different forms of family formats. It's not just the hum do hamare do.
So it's not just a nuclear family, not just a nuclear family.
Correct. People are living in together and you living in with the same gender, and all that is acceptable. So when you speak to people, when I speak to people in my circle, one common theme is that, so long as the person is good to me, speaking nicely with me, is polite and courteous, it doesn't matter to me what his or her, what is happening with his or her family. So this is one big change that I find. In fact, I find most of the change that has happened in India, in urban India, which I know of, is for the better. In Delhi, if you remember at that time, there was one South Indian restaurant. There was only Quality and Gaylords.
Right.
Today you have choice galore.
There was only two kinds of cars and two kinds of refrigerator.
Fiat and Ambassador.
That's right.
Fiat and Ambassador. Today I need to change my car. I don't know which one to buy. There is so much of choice. In case any of your viewers have a good idea, please let me know.
Right. So, all right, let's move from there to spirituality. What have you learned? Because you seem to have a underpinning, a sort of current behind all of your pursuits that is more spiritually inclined. What is that for you? What is spirituality for you?
Well, Rohit, I have not necessarily sought out anything. It's just that as it has come to me. So listening to Neeraj, when he would talk of the difference between the form and the essence, then made me look up some of our old scriptures, and only to discover or sort of conclude in my mind how our Sanatan principles converge with modern science and with Neeraj's poetry. All three of them.
How?
Because
tell us how they converge. Give us an example of how do they converge.
So you see, what is it in our old scriptures? We talk of the Atma,
the soul.
Right? We talk of the soul. If you go back 300, 400 years, in modern science at that time was largely Newtonian physics, which was about the shape and the motion of bodies. Whereas in the last 100 years, we are talking of atomic science and subatomic science and quantum physics, etc. So modern science has gone beyond just the shape and movement of bodies and trying to understand that, to trying to understand their composition. So
what you called the form and the essence earlier.
The form and the essence,
right? So moving from the external to the internal.
There's something beyond the matter.
Yeah, beyond
Correct.
matter.
So there's something beyond the matter. So that was like a starting point. We can, as you know, this is a subject which which is very vast. And in recent years, I have discovered very simple things because I never sought this out. It just came to me. I didn't even know what was the difference between Shrutis and Smritis till a few years back.
Tell us the difference.
Well, the way Shrutis is the Ved, Upanishads, perhaps the Gita, though some scholars might differ on that. That is the heart center of Sanatan principles or the heart center of Hinduism. Whereas Smritis are Ramayana, Mahabharata, Purans, which are more in story form.
Right. Smriti is what is remembered And Shruti is that which is inspired, that which comes to you, like a vision, like that kind of a revelation, right?
So Shruti cannot be ascribed to an author. That's
Mm-hmm.
another way to look at it.
Okay.
Whereas Smritis are all can be ascribed to an author.
Right. Because when it is divinely inspired, when it comes to you, then you cannot say it is yours. You know,
Correct.
that's why there would
Correct.
not be any author. So those are the kind of revelations, as they would call it in the Western world, that are
Yeah, and
ascribed to the Bible, that are ascribed to the Quran, that are ascribed to all these texts. The same applies in the Vedas. There are so many shrutis like that were revealed to people, information that may not make sense to us in our present time. When we start to study them, there are some things in there that don't make sense. But then we find that over time, scientists are beginning to understand and explain some of those details that were given to us in a very simple story-like form to help us understand it, because they weren't putting it into complex language. They weren't interested in putting it into that. They were more interested in the core substance that would help us elevate ourselves. The philosophy, the teachings.
that's right. I mean, Smritis sort of attract you. I just know a few shlokas. I don't know very many, but so much of wisdom. You know, one little shloka in Upanishads, which in our old home, the local Shastriji of the Arya Samaj used to recite.
Uh-huh.
Purna Midha, Purna Midam, Purnat, Purna Mudachyate. You know, you are also complete and I'm also complete. From the completeness comes the complete.
Mm-hmm.
And if completeness is taken away, you're still from the complete, you're still left with the complete. I mean, it's basically universal energy. All of us are part of it. We come from it, we go back into it, and we are also part of it. Now, this, just for those sages 5,000, 6,000 years ago, to think this through and put it across in such simple words, of course, Sanskrit at that time, is so fascinating.
This is the big myth of the Western civilization, is that in earlier times, people were not sophisticated. They were cavemen. They were, hunter-gatherers. These are the assumptions that are brought out. But what we learn from the Vedas is that even 10,000 years ago, where it's supposed to have been nomadic tribes wandering the earth, according to archaeologists and so on, that we were actually a very highly advanced civilizations that existed here on this earth. And there may have been hunter-gatherers too, but there were also highly advanced beings who had great wisdom and great knowledge and were trying to impart it in a way that we could benefit from in times to come. And although we think we're extremely advanced today, what we're finding is that the scientists are still unpacking what was mentioned by them thousands of years ago. They're still beginning. They've just been talking about energy in present time, but they were talking about that thousands of years ago as well. They were talking about the Atma, the fact that there is a life force energy within us. That too has been, science is no longer yet, not ready to deal with yet.
Well, science cannot explain what happened before the Big Bang theory.
Right.
So, sorry, before the Big Bang, not the Big Bang theory.
Yes. What happened before that? And then how does a Big Bang turn into all these creatures? There's no clear explanation. How come such elaborate DNA is formed that then forms the creatures? Because we know that creatures didn't just happen by some random chance. There's an elaborate code behind each species, behind each being that is there. That code determines everything about how they're going to eat, how they're going to drink, where they're going to feed, what they're going to do, how long they're going to live, everything, how their body is going to shape. What's writing the code? I mean, even human beings today, with thousands of scientists working on it, cannot write that elaborate kind of code and thereby create new species. They can't. They're not able to. Maybe one day they will imitate and copy-paste some of this information that is already there, and maybe they'll be able to replicate or mess up or create something else. Who knows? But the fact is that even with thousands of scientists working on it right now, they can study it, but they can't replicate it, right? Let's go to a different part. I want to see how you saw the synergy between poetry and spirituality. That's a very fascinating part of your journey that I discovered. This, where you were reading Gopaldas Neeraj, and then you were finding the spiritual wisdom there. So he seems to have imparted a lot of spiritual wisdom through his poetry as well, is it?
Well, whatever little I know is largely thanks to inspiration from his poetry. So if one line I can mention from Neeraj's poetry, um, this is on that number 108.
Uh-huh.
You find 108 coming in scriptures repeatedly. There are 108 beads in the mala. My grandmother used to chant the Gayatri Mantra 108 times. And then I heard Gopaldas Neeraj once say, Brahm roop hai ank 9, प्रकृति रूप है 8, एक सत्य है, शून्य में सिमटी सृष्टि विराट. So this number 108, which adds up to 9, it's the essence of creation. Because 9 never reduces. 9 threes are 27, 7 plus 2, 9, 9 fours are 36, 6 and 3, 9, and so on. So Brahm, 9 therefore represents Brahm, energy, which cannot
the
be,
universe,
which never reduces
or the
or
divine
increases.
or God, yeah.
Of the universe, universal energy. Whereas 8 is more like humankind. It keeps reducing. 8 twos are 16, 6 and 1, 7, 8 threes are 24, 4 and 2, 6, and so on, till 8 meets 9 again.
Okay.
When 8 meets 9, it is 72, 7, it becomes 9 again.
Wow.
So, so this was just, since you asked me the convergence between Neeraj's poetry and spirituality. So this is how Neeraj put it across. Brahm roop hai ank 9, prakriti roop hai 8. Ek satya hai. Shunya mein, shunya, mahashunya, the universe. Ek
So
satya hai,
shunya
shunya mein
is
simti
zero,
srishti virat.
just for those who don't
Shunya
understand.
is zero.
Yes.
Yeah, shunya is zero. And we refer to the universe as the mahashunya.
The great
the
zero.
Grand zero.
Yeah.
The great zero, the grand zero. And you find this 108 in our scriptures. There are 108 Upanishads. Krishna had 108 Gopikas in Vrindavan. The distance between earth to sun is 108 times the sun's diameter, as discovered by old sages. The distance between earth to moon is 108 times the moon's diameter. So this 108 repeats itself, since times immemorial. And Neeraj too wrote about it as the essence of creation and put it across in this, beautiful verse.
Lovely. That is really, I mean, there's a lot in there to unpack. I think that anyone who's listening to this will definitely get a lot from that. The importance of 108. Yeah.
I mean, his work is endless and it's largely spiritual, but it's laced with romance. Just as the Shrutis tend to be a bit abstract and a bit prosaic. But the Smritis bring them to life.
So tell me of the romance of what attracted you. I mean, I want your connection to his work, the romance that you saw there. And what did that do in your life? Let's take it there too.
Well, when I was growing up, the romance meant something else.
Okay.
Of course, later on, I began to see, the depth inside that, I began to go beyond the romance and understood the spiritual messages and the spiritual enlightenment in his poetry. But all those days back when I would listen to his songs, "Phoolon ke rang se, dil ki kalam se," it sort of spoke the language in simple words, which was inherent inside most of us growing up as in our 20s when love is blossoming.
Right. But, there's a part of spirituality that most people aren't aware of. They're aware of all these things about energy and the universe and this and that. But this part, that romance, that love, is equally a spiritual experience. And that people...
It is the most spiritual experience, Rohit.
Ah, okay.
Nothing is more spiritual in this world than love is.
Ah, and that is why we're all drawn towards it. We all want it, but what we don't realize that it is actually the most profound spiritual experience. It is the experience that we have between ourselves and the divine or God. And that experience is the greatest love of all, which all of us have been seeking. We are seeking it in the world and often getting frustrated and not quite getting what we want. We find ourselves, falling in love, falling out of love. Even people who are in love get together, get married, but then they don't feel the love so much anymore. And, all these phases we go through. But there is a love beyond all of this, beyond even what the poets have written about. And that divine love is perhaps the greatest thing of all, greater than all our knowledge, all our wisdom, all our understanding. Is there anything of
no matter
Neeraj's
how much you
poetry that
spend.
talks about that?
Oh, Neeraj's poetry is love poetry.
Ah,
He sang of love. All the Hindi songs that he wrote. लिखे जो खत तुझे वो तेरी याद में हजारों रंग के नजारे बन गए फूलों के रंग से दिल की करम से शोखियों में घोला जाए फूलों का शबाब. These are popular Hindi songs, but
right.
even the kavitas, there is so much of based on love, on human love.
Yes, of course. But you see,
All kinds of
even if you
love.
go into that human love, if you start to really, dig deep, you'll find that its root is in the infinite possibilities of divine love that go beyond the human form. Because ultimately,
That's
if you look at it? What is love?
So let me say a line from Neeraj if I can remember.
Okay.
जाति पाति से बड़ा धर्म है, धर्म ध्यान से बड़ा कर्म है, कर्म कांड से बड़ा मर्म है, लेकिन इन सब से बड़ा एक छोटा सा इंसान है, और जब वो प्यार करता है ये धरती स्वर्ग समान है.
All right, now translate that, please, for those who don't understand.
Jati pati is caste.
Yeah.
So dharma, religion is bigger than caste.
Mm-hmm.
But what is bigger than religion is karma, is your actions.
Yeah.
And what is bigger than your actions is your compassion. And what is bigger than all of them is a simple human being who, if he or she can love, then you have heaven on earth.
Mm.
So love is the only element in the universe which you can, no matter how much you spend, it only accumulates.
Mm. You, in fact, the more you give of it, the more you receive.
The more you receive.
Right? And the more you are able to receive, the more you're able to give. They go hand in hand. Also, being able to receive love is a big thing. Not everyone knows how to receive it.
Now, if you ask me too many questions on Neeraj, I'll get into a mood where I'll start reciting Neeraj, and our entire program will go on that.
No, what I want to know is, how did that impact your life? What did that do to you as a person?
So as I said, Rohit, in those moments, those periods of life when it was very difficult, life was very challenging, I would just listen to Neeraj's poetry and, live through those days.
Mm-hmm.
So I never took to alcohol because I had Neeraj's poetry. And when I met him, I told him that.
Okay.
I told him that, my day is not complete till I listen to something you have written. And he very gently touched my shoulder and he said, "Chalo, kisi ke to kaam aaye."
I was of some use to someone.
Yes.
Right. So I think that it is really important that we understand that each one of us can learn from your example, that instead of turning to some substance or turning to something, we can always look for inspiration. We can look for things that will inspire us, that will give us, basically we look for something that will satisfy our heart and our soul. And we need to find that. We need to find things that do that for us, because otherwise life is very difficult. There are a lot of challenges. There are so many different problems and situations that we face that it sometimes seems impossible and we feel like giving up. But it is exactly in those moments that we need to have places of inspiration. So I really recommend for everyone, just learn from these lessons and have your own places that you go to. Maybe it's poetry. Maybe it's something that uplifts your soul. Maybe it's some kind of meditation. Maybe it's some kind of yoga. Maybe it's some kind of exercise. Have the places where you naturally become happy and joyful and uplifted.
In that context, Rohit, since we started with sports, I feel that every person, young or not so young, should remain associated with sport. So of any kind, because the lessons that you learn in the sports field of losing and winning, of leadership, of teamwork, of tenacity, of not giving up, those are lessons of life. So I learned those lessons on the cricket field. Today I learn them on the golf course. You lose today, you win the next day, then you again lose the next day.
And so what's happening today is people have a very hard time with losing. They have a very hard time with whether it's the loss of a relationship or whether it's the loss of a job. Then they go into depression, then they go into all kinds of anxieties and fears. And the problem is that they haven't really become adept at it. One has to practice these things because there will be loss and there will be gain. There will be success and there will be failure. And we need to become good at it. Bhagavad Gita actually has a lovely verse right in the beginning, in the second chapter, where it says, happiness and distress, or happiness and sorrow, are like winter and summer seasons. They have
they come in a pair.
They come together. They have their appearance and their disappearance, and one should learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So I think what you're saying is very profound and very deeply spiritual. The idea that we need to develop, as you said, tenacity, the ability to take on these challenges of life and bounce back again, or resilience might be another word that one could use.
Sure.
You know, to be able to not give up and know that despite whatever's going on, we have the will, the courage, the motivation, the inspiration to move on. A lot of that inspiration, unfortunately, requires us to take a more spiritual look at life. Not unfortunately, but fortunately, requires us, is actually steering us towards a more spiritual way of life, where we understand what is spirit, what is energy, and how it lies in everything and everyone. And that is what uplifts us. Even behind the poetry, even behind the sport, as you distill out the essence of it, you begin to find that behind it is actually that presence of that divine force or God who is within everything that we do. Wonderful. Is there any last words you'd have for our listeners? Any particular, distilled life wisdom that you want to share with them?
Well, as I said, everybody comes up with their own formula of happiness or how to get happiness. For me, it was through stepping out of my comfort zone. So that may work for some, may not work for the others, but it's always given me happiness that whenever I've done something new, and you very kindly mentioned a few things, it always helps in your personal development, in your evolution. You may or may not succeed in worldly terms, but there's always evolution. So that is one thing which I hold dear to.
Yeah, very huge. What you're saying.
And the other thing is dignity of labor. Mm-hmm. There is no work in this world which is big or small, and I think people should respect. When I go into my condominium and there's that little guard who says to me, Jai Hind, I don't even know his name. The girl who comes to work in our homes, how much do we know about her? So, there is no work in this world which is big or small, and people should not be shy of doing any kind of work, so long as it's allowing you to live a life of self-respect.
Well, I think what's most important in all of those is if you understand that we are all here to serve. We're all serving something or someone. And if we develop a service attitude, then every work, whether it is you're cleaning the dishes or you're helping someone with something or whatever someone is doing or whatever you're doing, can all be in the service of each other. And to me, that's the ultimate expression of love. When you love someone, when you're serving others, that's how you show that, right? You can show it through other ways of affection and so on and so forth, but the universal way in which you can show love for everyone is by serving them. You see, the comfort zone part, I think I really resonate with that because I've kept stepping out of my comfort zone again and again all through my life, going on reinventing myself. And I see that you've done the same thing. You've constantly reinvented yourself, going from the corporate world, coming into, umpiring in cricket. And even as you age, then you found, okay, I have to find different ways of doing this, and then poetry, and then writing a book. And, it's a wonderful journey that you've had in your life. And I really commend you because what you're saying, and I think that is really the most important part of this, is that as you keep on rediscovering yourself, reinventing yourself, you find new abilities, new talents, new things that you never knew you had. And what happens as a result is actually you stay young longer. Your mind stays alert longer. And you don't just degenerate into what happens to most people is they just retire and then they do a little hobby, something here and there, but they don't get passionate about it, But if you get passionate about the things that you're interested in, your mind, your body will stay active and vibrant and alive for a much longer time. And you'll have a lot more to offer to the world. In fact, it can be some of the best years of your life as you're getting older.
Passion is the closest synonym of life.
Right?
That's how I see whatever passions people might have.
Right. And if you can take that passion and uplift it to something more deeply spiritual, well, you're going to find more meaning, more purpose, and ultimately more satisfaction in life. With that, let's wind up. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. I feel so blessed that you were able to join us on the show today. I would love for people to know about your book. So when it does come out, please let me know the title and I'll put it into the description. This might take a few months, I believe. What's the estimated date or time of release of your book?
So Rohit, it's expected to be released sometime later this year.
Okay, so do let us know because I would like to put it up for everyone so that they can purchase your book and support you on your journey. And I think you have a lot of wonderful things to share and it's going to be meaningful for everyone. So with that, thank you so much, Sandeep, for being here. Appreciate your...
Thank you, Rohit. Thank you, Rohit. Totally my pleasure and my privilege to have this opportunity to chat with you.
Thanks. And I'll see you soon. And perhaps after your book is launched, we'd love to get back again.